The best practice standards in social work supervision in accordance with the National Association of Social Workers and the Association of Social Work Boards, presented by Christian Woodworth. The National Association of Social Workers and the Association of Social Work Boards have developed the best practice standards in social work supervision to support and strengthen supervision for professional social workers. The standards provide a general framework that promotes uniformity and serves as a resource for issues related to supervision in the social work supervisory community. In recent years, the knowledge base of the social work profession has expanded and the population it serves has become more complex. Therefore, it is important to the profession to have assurance that all social workers are equipped with the necessary skills to deliver competent and ethical social work services. Equally important to the profession is the responsibility to protect clients. According to the NASW and the ASWB, supervision is an essential and integral part of the training and continued education required for the skillful development of professional social workers. Supervision protects clients, supports practitioners, and ensures the professional standards and quality services are delivered by competent social workers. Both the NASW Code of Ethics and the ASWB Model Social Work Practice Act served as a foundational document in the development of the supervision standards. The standards support the practice of social workers in various work settings and articulate the importance of a collective professional understanding of supervision within the social work community. What is supervision according to the NASW and the ASWB? There are numerous definitions of supervision. For the purposes of the supervision standards that are going to be set here, professional supervision is defined as the relationship between supervisor and a supervisee in which the responsibility and accountability for the development of competence, demeanor, and ethical practice take place. The supervisor is responsible for providing direction to the supervisee who applies social work theory, standardized knowledge, skills, competency, and the applicable ethical content in the practice setting. The supervisor and the supervisee both share responsibility for carrying out the role in this collaborative process. Supervision encompasses several interrelated functions and responsibilities. Each of these interrelated functions contributes to a larger responsibility or outcome that ensures clients are protected and that clients receive competent and ethical services from professional social workers. During supervision, services received by the client are evaluated and adjusted as needed to increase the benefit to the client. It is the supervisor's responsibility to ensure that supervisee provides competent, appropriate, and ethical services to the client. There are many models of supervision described in literature currently, ranging from traditional authoritarian models to more collaborative models. Different models of supervision place emphasis, in varying degrees, of course, on the client, the supervisor, the supervisee, or the context in which the supervision takes place. Ideally, the supervisor and the supervisee use a collaborative process when a supervision model is selected. However, it is ultimately the responsibility of the supervisor to select the model that works best for the professional development of the supervisee. The supervisor relationship is built on trust, confidentiality, support, and empathic experiences. Other qualities inherent in the supervisory relationship include constructive feedback, safety, respect, and self-care. The standards for social work supervision should be used in conjunction with professional judgment and should not be the exclusive basis on which a decision is made. Supervisors should always familiarize themselves with the supervisory requirements of regulatory and accreditation bodies that control their particular geographic area, work setting, or both. Supervision ensures that the supervisee obtains advanced knowledge so that their skills and abilities can be applied to client populations in an ethical and competent manner. Some areas of knowledge and the application of that knowledge to clients can only be translated during the supervisory process. Supervision provides guidance and enhances the quality of work for both the supervisor and the supervisee, and ultimately the client. The activities of supervision are captured by three overlapping domains. There are three primary domains that overlap in supervision. The first is administrative. Administrative supervision is synonymous with management and is the implementation of administrative methods that enable social workers to provide effective services to clients. Administrative supervision is oriented towards agency policy or organizational demands and focuses on a supervisee's level of functioning on the job and work assignments. Educational supervision focuses on professional concerns and relates to specific cases. It helps supervisees better understand social work philosophy, become more self-aware, and refine their knowledge and skills. Educational supervision focuses on staff development and the training needs of a social worker to a particular caseload. It includes activities in which the supervisee is guided to learn about assessment, treatment and intervention, identification and resolution of ethical issues, and evaluation and termination of services. The third overlapping element and domain of supervision is supportive. Supportive supervision decreases job stress that interferes with work performance and provides the supervisee with nurturing conditions that complement their success and encourage self-efficacy. Supervisees are faced with increasing challenges that contribute to job stress, including the growing complexity of client problems, unfavorable physical work environments, heavy workloads, and emotionally draining environments such as vicarious trauma. Supportive supervision is underscored by a climate of safety and trust where supervisees can develop their sense of professional identity. The combination of educational, administrative, and supportive supervision is necessary for the development of competent, ethical, and professional social workers. Now that there is a foundational understanding of what supervision is and its components, we are going to move on to discuss what are the requirements for someone to be a social work supervisor. There are certain requirements for a social worker to meet for them to become a supervisor. The qualifications for an approved social work supervisor are specified in the licensing statutes and regulatory standards of each jurisdiction and may include specifications for each level of social work practice or be universal, with one set of qualifications for all practice levels. The general qualifications for supervision may include the following: a current license to practice at the specific level or above the level in which the supervision will be provided and in the jurisdiction in which both the supervisor and the supervisee are practicing, a degree from an accredited school of social work, a specified coursework in supervision, a minimum number of continued education hours in supervisory practice as required by the jurisdiction, or both, a minimum of 3 years or post-licensure practice experience, continued education hours as required for maintenance of supervisory credentials in the practice jurisdiction, and being free from sanctions of the licensing board for violations of practice standards. In addition, social work supervisors should have experience and expertise in the practice arena and with the population of supervisees practice such as addictions, children and adolescents, mental health, and community organization. Supervisors should have competencies in the theories and various modalities of treatment and maintain currency through the use of professional journals and continued education. For supervision to be effective, it requires knowledge of the principles of supervision and the ability to demonstrate necessary skills such as addressing both strengths and challenges of the supervisee, modeling and discussing ethical practice, and providing supportive and encouragement in the learning context. Supervisors should be familiar with the administrative and organizational structure of the agency and practice domain of the supervisee. Now that we understand what supervision is and what qualifications it takes for a social worker to become an approved supervisor, we now can move on to discuss the 5 standards of supervision set forth by the NASW and the ASWB. The first standard is the context in supervision. There are general contextual matters that are important to the supervision process. The first one is understanding the scope of practice. Supervision may be provided to address a variety of issues. Among the most common is supervision for obtaining an advanced practice license, particularly a clinical license. Supervision may also be provided to new or recent graduates focusing on the practical aspects of helping clients. It may also include social workers who have been sanctioned following disciplinary action and those learning a new practice or skill. Supervisors must be sure that they meet the qualifications to become a supervisor and have a clear understanding of the skills and knowledge that the supervisor relationship is designed to help the supervisee develop. Another important contextual matter is communities of practice. Many social workers practice within the community in which they live and may have insider knowledge about community issues that may assist in building the therapeutic alliance, identifying appropriate referrals, or simply understanding clients' concerns. Being an insider may also result in dual or multiple relationships. Social worker supervisors may address these issues by establishing parameters to the supervisor relationship with attention to boundaries and self-monitoring. In all cases, supervisors must ensure that the professional relationship is paramount and protected. The third matter is interdisciplinary supervision. With the increasing focus on interdisciplinary practice in recent years, social workers may be supervised by a professional of a different discipline. Although this may be appropriate within the team or unit context, social workers should seek supervision or consultation from another social worker with regard to specific social work practices and issues. Similarly, a social worker providing supervision to a member of another discipline should refer the supervisee to a member of their own profession for practice-specific supervision or consultation. The fourth matter is cultural awareness and cross-cultural supervision. Social work supervisors should adhere to the Nassau standards of cultural competence in social work practice and have specialized knowledge and understanding about the culture of which client population served by the supervisee. Supervisors should be able to communicate information about diverse client groups to supervisees and help them to use appropriate methodological approaches, skills, and techniques that reflect the understanding of the role of culture in the helping process. The supervisor who is supervising a social worker with a different cultural background should develop knowledge about the culture as it relates to social work practice. Primary sources of information may include the supervisee or other practitioners familiar with the supervisee's cultural community. The last matter is dual supervision and conflict resolution. In circumstances in which a supervisee is being administratively or clinically supervised simultaneously by more than one person, it is best practice to have contractual agreement or memorandum of understanding delineating the role of each supervisor, including parameters of the relationships, information sharing, priorities, and how conflicts will be resolved. If no agreement exists, the immediate employment supervisor may have the final say. The second standard for best practice in supervision is the conduct of supervision. The underlying agreement between supervisors and supervisees includes the premise that supervisees depend on the skills and expertise of supervisors to guide them. Respect for the different roles that supervisors and supervisees play in the supervisory relationship is a key factor to success in supervision. It's pivotal to remain objective in supervision, to negotiate a supervision contract with mutual agreeable goals, responsibilities, and timeframes. To also provide regular feedback to supervisees on their progress towards their goals. To establish a method for resolving communication and other problems in the supervision session so that they can be addressed. Identify feelings supervisees have about their clients that can interfere with or limit the process of professional services. There are also several aspects of this standard of supervision. The first being confidentiality. Supervisors must ensure that all client information be kept private and confidential, except when disclosure is mandated by law. Supervisees should inform clients during the initial interview that their personal information is being shared in a supervisory relationship. Supervisors also have an obligation to protect and keep the supervisory process confidential and only release information as required by the regulatory board to obtain licensure or, if necessary, for disciplinary purposes. The second aspect of this standard is contracting for supervision. In situations in which an agency may not have a clinical supervisor who meets the qualifications of a supervisor as required by the regulatory board, a social work supervisee may contract for supervision services outside the agency to qualify for a clinical license. Supervisees should contact the regulatory board in their jurisdictions in advance of contracting to confirm whether such a practice is permitted and confirm the documentation required from the supervisor. The time frame required for the supervision period should be also confirmed. Contracting for outside supervision can be problematic and may place a supervisor at risk. If the supervisee is paying for the services, he or she can dismiss the supervisor, especially if disagreement or conflict arises. The supervisee can also blame the supervisor if there is a failure in the licensing process. In addition, the supervisor can encounter case management conflicts between the supervisee and the agency. Development of a contractual agreement among the social worker, the supervisor, and the employing agency is essential in preventing problems in the supervisory relationship. The agreement should clearly delineate the agency's authority and grant permission for the supervisor to provide clinical supervision. Evaluation responsibilities, periodic written reports, and issues of confidentiality should also be included in the agreement. Supervisors and supervisees should also sign a written contract that outlines the parameters of the supervisor relationship. Frequent written progress reports prepared by the supervisor should be required and, if appropriate, meet the ongoing standards established by jurisdictions and agency requirements. The next aspect is leadership and role model. Supervisors play a key role in the professional development of their supervisees. The actions and advice of the supervisor are keenly observed by supervisees and consequently influence much of the supervisee's thinking and behavior. Teaching is an important function of the supervisor who models the behavior the supervisee will emulate. Supervisors should create a learning environment in which supervisees learn about the internal and external environments in which they work, as well as the environments in which their clients find themselves each day. There's also the aspect of competency. Social work supervisors should be competent and participate in ongoing continued education and certification programs and supervision. Supervisors should be aware of growth and development in social work practice and be able to implement evidence-based practice into the supervisory process. Supervisors should also be aware of their limitations and operate within the scope of their competence. When specialty practice areas are unfamiliar, supervisors should obtain assistance or refer supervisees to an appropriate source for consultation in the desired area. The last two aspects are supervisory signing off and self-care. As for supervisory signing off, supervisors should submit reimbursement claims only for services they have performed. Signing off on services performed by a supervisee who is ineligible to seek reimbursement is fraudulent. Supervisors and supervisees should be aware of the statutes and regulations addressing this matter in their jurisdictions. When it comes to self-care, it is crucial for supervisors to pay attention to signs of job stress and address them with their supervisees and themselves. Supervisors should provide resources to help supervisees demonstrating symptoms of job stress and make outside referrals as necessary. Peer consultation can be helpful to supervisors and supervisees in such cases. The third standard for supervision involves legal and regulatory issues. Social worker supervisors share responsibilities for the services provided to clients. Liability of supervisors has been determined by the courts and includes direct liability related to negligent or inadequate supervision and vicarious liability related to negligent conduct by supervisees. Supervisors and supervisees should both have professional liability insurance. In an agency setting, a supervisor's potential liability is affected by his or her level of responsibility and authority. Supervisors should familiarize themselves with the scope of their responsibility and authority, which may be specified in an agency written policy manual, the supervisor's job description, or a written contractual agreement. The requirements and expectations of a supervisor's position also may affect liability, especially in situations in which the supervisor may have competing demands and is unable to adequately perform his or her supervisory functions, such situations may present legal challenges. Looking further at liability, direct liability may be charged against a supervisor when inappropriate recommendations carried out by a supervisee are to a client's detriment. Direct liability can also be charged when a supervisor assigns duties to a supervisee who is inadequately prepared for them. Social worker supervisors should be proactive in preventing violations that should be discussed at the beginning of the supervisory relationship. A supervisor should not supervise family members, current or former partners, close friends, or any person with whom the supervisor had a therapeutic or familial relationship. In addition, A supervisor should not engage in a therapeutic relationship with a supervisee. Vicarious liability involves incorrect acts or omissions committed by the supervisee that can also be attributed to the supervisor. Supervisees can be held to the same standard or care and skill as that of their supervisors and are expected to abide by the statutes and regulations in the jurisdictions. There are certain things supervisors should do when regarding risk management. And these include ensuring that the services provided to clients by supervisees must or exceed standards of practice, maintain documentation of supervision, monitor supervisees' professional work activities, identify actions that might pose a danger to the health and or welfare of the supervisee's clients, and take prompt and appropriate remedial measures, and identify and address many conditions that impair a supervisee's ability to practice social work with reasonable skill, judgment, and safety. When it comes to regulations, the statutes and regulations for the qualifications of supervisors and licensing requirements for supervisees may vary by jurisdiction. An increasing number of jurisdictions are requesting supervision contracts and plans prior to commencement of supervision. It is the responsibility of supervisors and supervisees to familiarize themselves with the specific requirements in their jurisdictions for the qualifications for supervision, licensure, supervision, contracts and plans, and other requirements. Many social work regulations require all supervision for purposes of licensure to be provided by a licensed clinical social worker. Regarding documentation, documentation is an important legal tool to verify the provision of services. Supervisors should assist supervisees in learning how to properly document client services performed, regularly review their documentation, and hold them to high standards. Each supervisor session should be documented separately by the supervisor and supervisee. Documentation for supervised sessions should be provided to the supervisee within a reasonable time after each session. Social worker regulatory boards may request some form of supervision documentation with supervisee's application for licensure. Records should be safeguarded and kept confidential. When appropriate, supervisors should train supervisees to document for reimbursement and claim submission. There are also other legal concerns to be addressed. The experienced social worker developing skills in a new specialty area may receive supervision limited to the new area of practice. A supervisor is selected on the basis of his or her expertise in the specialty area. Having a supervision contract or plan detailing the obligations of both parties may be helpful. Supervision may be required following disciplinary action. In such situations, an agreement between the supervisor-supervisory and other authorities should be developed to address such items as corrective issues to be covered and supervision, information sharing between the parties, and frequency of supervision. Social work supervisors may retain a consultant for case consultation and review as necessary, especially when conflicts arise. Social work supervisors and supervisees may face ethical dilemmas when providing services to clients. To address those dilemmas, the supervisor and the supervisee should have a thorough knowledge of the code of ethics under which they practice. The NASW Code of Ethics serves as a guide to assist supervisors in working with ethical issues that arise in supervisory relationships. Supervisors have the responsibility to address any confusion that supervisees may encounter as a result of ethical demands. A supervisor should be aware of the differences between professional ethics, core values and personal moral beliefs, and help the supervisee, to distinguish these elements when making practice decisions. Supervisors can use the supervisory relationship as a training ground for ethical discretion, analysis, and decision making. When it comes to ethical decision making, supervisors help supervisees learn ethical decision making, a process that is both cognitive and emotional. Supervisors should discuss and model the process of identifying and exploring problems, looking at issues, values, principles, and regulations. Supervisors and their supervisees should discuss possible consequences as well as costs and benefits of certain actions. They should explore what actions best achieve fairness, justice, respect for others, make a decision about actions to be taken, and evaluate them after implementation. When a supervisee makes an ethical mistake, he or she, with the assistance of the supervisor, should try to correct any damages and learn how to avoid the mistake in the future. If appropriate or required by jurisdiction, the violation may have to be reported to the licensing board. When it comes to boundaries, the supervisor relationship is an excellent forum for supervisees to learn about boundaries with clients. Ethical issues related directly to supervision include the nature of the professional responsibility to the supervisee, appropriate boundaries and responsibilities when dealing with incompetent or unethical behavior. Becoming involved in a romantic or familiar relationship with a supervisee is an ethical violation and should be strictly avoided because it creates marked role conflict that can fatally undermine the supervisory relationship. If the supervisor recognizes a potential boundary issue with a supervisee, he or she should acknowledge it, assess how the boundary issue has affected supervision, and resolve the conflict. Although the supervisory relationship is between professionals, supervisors usually have more power in the relationship than supervisees. To avoid boundary problems and conflicts of interest with a supervisee, the ethical supervisor must accept his or her power and be comfortable in using the authority to ensure accountability and protect clients. And there are certain ethical considerations to be included. A supervisor should always focus on the goals of supervision and the nature of the supervisory relationship and avoid providing psychotherapy services to the supervisee. Supervision by supervisors working with more than one supervisee should see each supervisee as an individual and adapt to the supervisee's needs. At the same time, supervisors must be fair and consistent when providing supervision to multiple supervisees. When it comes to self-disclosure, supervisors should be discreet in sharing personal information and not allow it to become the focus of supervision. When personal information is disclosed, it should be brief and support the goals of supervision. Supervisors should explain their comments and rationale to best help supervisees gain understanding of appropriate techniques to use in the interview process with clients. Attending to safety requires that supervisors make supervisees aware of safety issues and train them to how to respond to workplace conflict, respond to threats and harassment, protect property, and deal with assault and their emotional aftermath. Supervisors have supervisee plans for safety in the office and in the community by learning nonviolent response strategies and appropriate ways to respond to crisis. In regards to alternative practice, the social work supervisor should decide whether an alternative practice, a non-traditional social work intervention, is the best modality to treat a supervisee for supervisee to use with a client. When a supervisee uses an alternative practice, the supervisor should have expertise of that practice and ensure that the supervisee has the prerequisite training and knowledge to perform the alternative practice. In situations in which the supervisor does not have the skills to provide the alternative practice, it may be necessary to involve a second supervisor. In such cases, the two supervisors should work closely together to avoid conflict and ensure effective use of the alternative practice for the client. The fifth and final standard of social work supervision is technology. The rapid growth and advances in technology present many opportunities and challenges in supervisory relationships. When using or providing supervision by technological means, supervisors and supervisees should follow standards applied to a face-to-face supervisor relationship. Supervisors should demonstrate competency in the use of technology for supervision purposes and keep abreast of emerging technologies. Supervisors should be aware of the risks and benefits of using technology in social work practice and implement them in the learning process for supervisees. All applicable federal, provincial, and state laws should be adhered to, including privacy and security rules that may address patient rights, confidentiality, allowable disclosure, and documentation, and include requirements regarding data protection, encryption, firewalls, and password protections. When supervision is being provided for licensure purposes, supervisors and supervisees have the responsibility to familiarize themselves with a specific definition and requirements by social work regulatory boards for the use of technology in practice. For successful communication, compatible equipment, software, and other infrastructure are required by both parties. For a supervisor to address distant supervision, the technology being used for supervision purposes is gradually increasing. Video conferencing is a growing technology used to provide supervision, especially in remote areas. Some jurisdictions allow electronic means for supervision. Others may limit the amount of supervision that can be provided from a distance. When using technology to provide distance supervision, one must be aware of standards of best practice for providing this tool and be knowledgeable of the statutes and regulations governing the provision of such services. Regarding risk management of technology, using technology in social work practice presents many risks. Supervisors should ensure a learning process that emphasizes a standard of care consistent with the ANSW Code of Ethics, ANSW and ASWB standards for technology and social work practice, the Canadian Social Workers Code of Ethics, licensing laws, applicable organization policies and procedures, and regulations for businesses. Doing so ensures high-quality services, protects the supervisor, supervisee, and client, and safeguards against malpractice issues. As part of addressing the standards for supervision in social work, it is important to address and discuss the outcomes and endings of supervision. When it comes to evaluations and outcomes, the evaluation and outcome of the supervisory process is an integral part of the development of professional social workers. The evaluation of the supervisee, as well as the evaluation of the impact and outcome of supervision, is a significant responsibility to the supervisor. An evaluation serves many purposes, which may depend on the setting and context of supervision. And evaluation can be used to determine whether a supervisee is able to practice social work with increasing independence in a competent and ethical manner. An evaluation can also be used for licensure or credentialing reasons, annual job performance, probation, promotion, or merit salary increases. Social work supervisors have the responsibility of evaluating the performance of supervisees in a fair manner with clearly stated criteria. All evaluations have several common elements. The first element is a formal agreement between the supervisor and the supervisee regarding expectations for the outcome of the evaluative process. At the beginning of each supervisory relationship, the supervisor, in collaboration with the supervisee, should prepare written, measurable goals and specific guidelines to evaluate the supervisee's performance. In addition, the evaluation should include a time frame for goal attainment and a systematic procedure for disengaging from supervision once the goal has been reached. There are also tools that can be used to measure supervision goals in combination with various predetermined criteria included, such as case studies, progress notes, conversations, the successful implementation of treatment plans, and client outcomes. To enhance the learning and increase the effectiveness of supervision, a systemic procedure for ongoing supervisor feedback is necessary. Feedback during the supervisory process is planned and continuous and in written and verbal form. Planned supervisory feedback allows for the supervisor and supervisee to make modifications if needed to improve professional practice and skill development. Continuous feedback also helps to determine the impact of and effectiveness of the received supervision. When using an evaluation as a learning process, clinical and administrative errors can be expected and do occur, but should not be used as in a punitive manner. The final stage of an evaluation process should include discussion of future challenges that a supervisee may encounter and the resources that the supervisee can use to resolve the challenges. The goals of an evaluation process are to improve the delivery of services to clients, maintain ethical and competent social work practice, and protect the public. Structuring an evaluation process focused on the supervisory learning experience and the identification of future learning needs is an important part of the supervisory process. Supervisors have the responsibility of researching and selecting the best evaluative tool for supervision. For purposes of licensing and credentialing, a supervisor evaluation is an aid to public protection. The supervisor is the last gate to competent, independent clinical practice and one of the best resources regarding the supervisee's fitness to practice social work. The supervisor has the responsibility of identifying incompetent or unethical practices and taking appropriate steps to properly address the errors of the supervisee. The final part of any supervisory relationship is termination. Ending the supervisory relationship is just as important as beginning it, and a supervisor should devote attention to it. Termination occurs when the supervisor or supervisee leaves the organization or is promoted, or when the supervisee obtains licensure. It may also occur when goals are achieved in the agreement between supervisor and supervisee. It is important for supervisors to identify early on the dynamics and terminations as they emerge and assist supervisees in learning specific skills to deal with termination. Helping supervisees to address their concerns about termination can help make termination a good experience. All documentation by the supervisor should be completed by the time of termination. It is unprofessional and possibly unethical to withhold status of final reports, particularly where such reports are required for licensing documentation. There are two areas of work that require attention when it comes to termination. Termination of the supervisory relationship and termination of the supervisee-client relationship. When the supervisor is leaving, if appropriate, a smooth transition to a new supervisor should be arranged. The skills used in ending a supervisor relationship can also be used with clients. A supervisor models for the supervisee the clients required to terminate with clients and address concerns that they may have about termination. Supervisors focus on the termination phase to ensure a quality and safe termination of the supervisee-client relationship and make for a positive supervisor-supervisee transition. Now that we've covered the contents of standards for social work supervision, this particular reading did not come with a case study, so I have developed a couple discussion questions for everyone to follow this week. An effort for yellow dig discussion. So the questions I have came up with are: how do the best practice standards in social work supervision promote collaboration, communication, and teamwork among social work students and supervisors? Secondly, what challenges might social work students face in adhering to best practice standards in supervision, and how can supervisors address these challenges? Here's my reference page, and thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone has a good week.